Welcome back to Seryla Philosophy. I would like to read a quote from Sir Thomas Pope Blount. Quote, "Learning does but serve to fill us full of artificial airs. That which we so much admire under the name of learning is only knowing the fancies of particular men." Let us continue. Episode 2, Defined Coercion. From Book 1, Seryla Philosophy, Rational Thought with Accountability. Defined coercion leads to the release of freedom and liberty. In the book, the paragraphs are numbered. So let's start with paragraph 1. When we discover how to separate arbitrary coercion from non-arbitrary coercion, we will reduce our suffering, promote harmony, and improve the condition of humankind. We should seek this quality of life and move that quality of life forward for future generations. Nevertheless, we currently justify our actions from a cobweb of ideas procured over a long history of thought. None of our historical or current thought systems that we have can provide physical evidence to distinguish arbitrary coercion from non-arbitrary coercion. This means that any assertion we make to what is coercion and what is not coercion are only human decrees. If we reflect for a moment, we can find many historical decrees we have today that we have placed together in arbitrary ways. Paragraph 2. Here is a small inventory of these old and accepted pronouncements. We have the conviction held by many people that we ought to operate to our individual self-interest. This individual self-interest idea has its origin in our philosophical declaration of individual pursuit of happiness. We have our religious decree that a higher authority has given this planet and its creatures as property to individual human beings. This higher authority being also has given selected human beings special understanding over other people concerning its commands. We have ideas justified by reason and rational thought with no requirement to stay connected to our physical realities. Instead, reason and rational thought connects our unreliable mental environment with a blurry measurement against bases, motives, and good sense. We have governments that allow people to evaluate the value of their self-interest against their own self-interest. We have the cause and effect idea from science that we have applied against human social activity. When it fails, people offer it as proof that we cannot apply reason and rational thought to human activity. We have economic ideology procure this and state that human economic activity is beyond human comprehension. What economic behaviors we cannot comprehend, we can leave to an invisible force for moral guidance. We have human decrees from philosophy, religion, and economics that people, when left alone, will do more good than bad. We have systems of thought from economic and philosophic theory, as well as government and religious systems of thought that stands on an undefined idea that we should have no arbitrary will against any individual. Arbitrary will comes from the coercive animal and denies us our freedom and liberty. Nevertheless, no one has removed the claim of arbitrary will against the wills of their own application. Paragraph 3. What all this means is that coercion, defined as arbitrary will that is forced on an individual, derives from a long history of ideas pulled together by rational thought, sensing its position, mixed with divine guidance ideas. We have no historical system of thought that can make a distinction between arbitrary and a non-arbitrary will applied against another. Until we can, no one can claim that his or her rules operate with justified coercion or unjustified narrow self-interest. What this means is that our religions, our secular groups, our governments, and our economic rules of the game operate with arbitrary rules, as we cannot make them accountable under religious or rational thought. Paragraph 4. There is a twofold reason why arbitrary systems of thought continue. Reason 1. We have a moral void in our human society throughout our earth that leaves us without any recourse except to act in our own non-evaluative and narrow self-interest. If we do not, we can have the physical consequences of being homeless, hungry, and more. When we have a majority of behavioral actions with no solid moral foundation that occurs around each individual, we operate largely in the survival mode. We have many people that ignore suffering, and even many that view suffering of others as justification to their privileged position. This last statement involves ideas that led people to view themselves as superior and above others over all manners of existence. The random position of birth could surround people with ideas of superiority, inferiority, dependent on their position in society. The random position of birth, where people are provided with individualistic, superior abilities, such as perhaps understanding mathematics, ability to dance, and so on, may lead some people to think they are superior to people in all ways. We have religions that teach we should love and care for the suffering. We also have religions that teach the importance of money, wealth, and their exemption to moral obligations because their God had decided who is to live in paradise on earth and who is to suffer on earth. Many believe their God has given them success and privilege, and in this, their God has given others poverty and suffering. They view themselves justified to exempt themselves from any moral code of conduct, because their God determined the state of our human suffering, and they were not to interfere with the will of their God. We also have the philosophy of moral relativism, faith-based economics, and subgroups of individuals that determine government policies. They, too, bring arbitrary ideas to exempt themselves from a required moral code of conduct. Therefore, on closer examination, we discover that we operate without clear moral guidance in all areas, be it religion, secularism, governments, or economics. Paragraph 5. Reason 2. When people operate in survival mode, they seek power for protection and security in position. People seek this power and position without any comprehension or clear understanding to our moral code of conduct between human beings. Since no clear moral code of conduct exists, this leads us to the use of coercion. When we apply coercion and we claim it as justified, we cannot know its accuracy, as we have determined it by our historical and arbitrary systems of thought. Arbitrary coercion then leads us to reduce and even eliminate freedom and liberty. I have made an absolute statement that we are currently operating under arbitrary thought systems that end in survival and power acquisition mode. This is a broadband statement. This means that in the large picture, this is what is happening. Any one of us can animate in the narrow band and provide specific situations that do not support my statement. Nevertheless, in the collective sense, be it by the actions of all individuals and the power and weight of given individual actions to individuals, we operate under this mode. The idea that it may be better here and now than before does not eliminate the realities of the collective sense, nor does it justify not progressing forward. Until our physically based balance to moral conduct reaches a certain point, we are certain to be in a state of progression. One objective of this book is to assist humankind towards accurate moral positions based on physical evidence that leads to the improvement of the quality of life for all human beings. Paragraph 6. We have based our historical view of coercion on decrees. Part 1a. We have a rich history of philosophers, theologians, and economists. They have provided their positions that deal with these specific topics. They often inadvertently contribute to the sustaining of coercion and other basic survival modes. There are volumes and volumes of mental animations by people over thousands of years. Our philosophers often focus on human happiness as being our ultimate end. John Locke moved the idea of individual pursuit of happiness as the highest aspiration of humankind into the minds of landowners, the precursors to modern capitalists. Theologians moved the idea of pursuit of happiness to mean the pursuit of their God. In doing so, they decreed that property ownership was ordained and given to humankind by the authority of their Creator. This authority was higher and absolute, and therefore not questionable. Friedrich Nietzsche created the idea of his ideal man. He allowed people to animate that some people, perhaps themselves, were greater in all aspects of existence than other human beings were. Immanuel Kant made a broadband statement to his categorical imperative, but did not connect to our physical world. He allowed for the idea that ideas sprang forward from a greater and otherworldly source. We had David Hume, who announced that reason and rational thought could not understand or comprehend the complexity of the actions of all individuals in our society. We had Adam Smith, a contemporary and friend of David Hume, picked up this idea that no human ability to bring accountability to a social understanding and applied it to economic activity. We will see that all this decreed thought from history continues to affect us today. Paragraph 7. We have based our historical view of coercion on decrees. Part 1b. We have our modern capitalists that took their cue from their viewed father of finances, Adam Smith. Adam Smith took the idea from David Hume that no individual could comprehend all things and moved it into economics when he made his famous invisible hand statement. This statement, though published in 1776, has a continued effect on our thought and has contributed to our dismissal of any long-term consequences of our economic behaviors. The modern extended order of capitalism often refers to this invisible hand when others confront their self-interest with resistance. Anything that resists against their invisible hand, they often follow with a cry of coercion via arbitrary will, which in turn violates their decreed freedom and liberty. Please allow me to present the statement by Adam Smith. Bibliography 1, Book 4, Chapter 2, page 335. As every individual, therefore, endeavors as much as he can both to employ his capital in the support of domestic industry, and so to direct that industry that its produce may be of the greatest value, every individual necessarily labors to render the annual revenue of the society as great as he can. He generally, indeed, neither intends to promote the public interest, nor knows how much he is promoting it. By preferring the support of domestic to that of foreign industry, he intends only his own security, and by directing that industry in such a manner as its produce may be of the greatest value, he intends only his own gain. And he is in this, as in many other cases, led by an invisible hand to promote an end which was no part of his intention. Nor is it always the worse for the society that it was no part of it. By pursuing his own interest, he frequently promotes that of the society more effectively than when he really intends to promote it. I have never known such good done by those who affected to trade for the public good. It is an affection, indeed, not very common among merchants, and very few words need to be employed in dissuading them from it. Paragraph 8, Part 1c. We have our modern capitalists taking cue to their idea from their viewed father of finances, Adam Smith. People in recent history, like Milton Friedman and Friedrich A. Hayek, their conclusion had us placing faith in the invisible hand. If anyone was working in his or her self-interest, somehow that translated into we were all working towards a common self-interest of greater good. Hayek wrote of freedom as being free of coercion by the arbitrary will of others to follow the invisible hand. Hayek wrote, Bibliography 2, page 31, "Our faith in freedom does not rest on the foreseeable results in particular circumstances, on the belief that it will, on balance, release more forces for the good than for the bad." End of quote. We now had a belief that unevaluated freedom would lead us by a John Locke general consensus to good. Footnote: the general consensus idea from John Locke is discussed in full in the chapter John Locke and the Big Giveaway. We now had a belief that the unevaluated freedom would lead us by a John Locke general consensus to good. This allowed actions to be without evaluation as to whether they were good or bad actions. This could only allow power to move its self-interest, independent of whether it was a good or bad self-interest, forward and over top of people. Faith in freedom meant accepting all actions without any requirement to accountability and questioning self-created authorities. Paragraph 9. We have based our historical view of coercion on decrees, Part 2. What Milton Friedman and Friedrich A. Hayek left us with was a faith-based form of capitalism. It also meant we had an unaccountable system of thought, and worse yet, an unaccountable system of action. These Chicago-based men transferred our moral obligation between each of us to their economic rules of the game. We had justifications to self-interest actions with no physical evidence based on the following ideas presented as decrees. Decree 1. Our ultimate end was decreed to be our personally desired and individualistic pursuit of happiness. Decree 2. We had decreed that each individual had the God-given right to own all things on this planet and in the universe. Decree 3. We had decreed that each individual had a God-given right to any individual self-interest and to use our planet resources as they perceived in their self-interest manner. Decree 4. We had decreed ideas that some people were superior over all areas of existence. Decree 5. We had decreed that economic actions were individuals in pursuit of happiness that involved self-interest actions, and this moved humankind to good in a greater degree than bad. Decree 6. We had decreed that since no one individual could comprehend all individual actions, we could not identify freedom and liberty, but could only restrict coercion. Decree 7. We had decreed by use of rational thought that this coercion was anything that violated the rules of the game developed by the extended order of capitalism. Paragraph 10. We have based our historical view of coercion on decrees, Part 3. The problem with this historical thought was that we based it on a human egocentric view. All our past ideas were ideas measured towards our own internal existence. Our pursuit of happiness idea made the relational measurement to our ideas and actions to be against our own human mind. Happiness led us to personal desires. There is nothing wrong with wanting happiness. Nevertheless, if we were in a constant state of happiness, we would be carried off to the funny farm. Happiness is an excited state that eventually comes to saturation and then to a natural attenuation. We cannot maintain a state of constant happiness. Footnote 2. This statement is a broadband statement. Some people may be known as a constantly happy person. Whether any individual is or can be in a constant state of happiness is not the source to the statement, but rather to a collective and normalized population of people. Return. We cannot maintain a state of constant happiness. To measure ideas and actions against the obtainment of happiness meant we were measuring the value, worth, and moral character of the ideas against an arbitrary source, individual and personal desires that varied from person to person. We have arguments that claim the end is in the pursuit. This ignores the relationship between pursuit and happiness. The ultimate end of pursuit by itself is action. Therefore, we are back to liberty and freedom. With the idea of happiness attached to pursuit, we place ourselves into action in our physical world by measurement against the non-physical existence of our experienced happiness. Without physical connections, we can animate anything we want without any relationship to reality or moral obligations. Our historical philosophy becomes arbitrary. If our beginning of philosophical inquiry was flawed, all our human history of thought collapses. Our ideas of gods fail, like our egocentric view of our pursuit of happiness as an ultimate end for humankind. We had developed God ideas relational to our specific existence in states of historical ignorance. When we animate in our human mind various God ideas and pursuit of happiness without accountability, we pull these ideas together and arrive to ideas of a God giving the earth as a gift. This arbitrarily justifies individuals with economic and political position to engage in coercion by the use of this false reality to their ends. We made our moral ideas relational to our human mental existence. Paragraph 11. We have based our historical view of coercion on decrees, Part 4. How can we stop coercive indenturing and manipulation of people to human-created systems when we are free to animate reality to anything we want with our minds? If we can attach reality to any idea, we can decree anything we want. We cannot understand and identify coercion under these conditions. It is not that reason and rational thought collapses under the weight of large civilizations, as it always has been a collapsed system of thought, as reason and rational thought itself is not an accountable system. Reason and rational thought applied to social actions resulted in erroneous combinations of decreed ideas, such as our pursuit of happiness and liberty both being universal in nature. We also have erroneous combinations of decreed rational and divine ideas, such as our pursuit of happiness and a God giving us ownership of all things. Like theological ideas, reason and rational thought could move without accountability and come to conflicting conclusions. The enlightenment of rational thought moved us from a fundamental disconnection to reality to a partial or even weak connection to reality. In our rational thought, we are only required to think it or sense it to be right. The Enlightenment period, with the exception of perhaps Thomas Paine, was an enlightenment that moved from one unaccountable system of thought to a different unaccountable system of thought. Paragraph 12. To understand and identify coercion requires that we stay connected to our physical existence. This is our first step. To understand what coercion is and how we can release ourselves to freedom, liberty, and our ultimate end in life, we must stop our egocentric view. We must move conceptually our mental existence from revolving around us to perceive that we are relational to physical existence. We need to get out of ourselves and see that we are products of our physical existence, both in design and in our thought. Our thinking and understanding can be relational to physical existence, or it can be lost to the chaos of our own human mind. We can know our Creator, that is, our physical existence, or we can separate from the truth of existence and live mentally in all kinds of manufactured ideas broken from physical existence. We can maintain the idea of reality with real things, or we can attach the idea of reality to anything we desire, despite any misalignment with reality. To understand what coercion is, what freedom and liberty is, what our humankind ultimate end is, we must not measure reality against our mental chaos. Instead, we must measure reality against our incoming physical existence. This starts with how physical existence inputs us. To obtain our moral code of conduct, we must measure against the reality of our human physical existence for guidance. Physical existence has determined our conduct between one and another. Physical existence has determined it by how it has created us. We use our human physical construction as our connections to reality. From this physical reality, we can provide physical evidence to our moral code of conduct. We find our code of conduct between us in the physical structure, what makes a human being across all human beings. Paragraph 13. Once we break our ideas from the chaos of the human mind and measure our ideas against our physical existence to maintain a relational understanding to reality, we can begin to understand our moral obligations. Although David Hume may be correct that no one individual can comprehend the individual actions of all individuals, we can create a tool to bring moral measurement. When each individual has this tool, we begin to have individual moral actions engaged by each individual. When each individual uses our physical existence as our reality measurement, we move our proposed faith in the invisible hand away from its inherent chaotic swings. We amend our ideas based in false reality to stable and accurate reality-based ideas. In our simple reality loop, we can remove the manipulation that comes with the faith and the general consensus ideas and ground the interference that comes from the created false reality ideas. This greatly reduces the noise of false reality mental animations to human thought. In our simple reality loop, we include one reality, physical existence. No one person could ever claim any ultimate authority, since physical existence is the same for all of us. Now we can begin to understand when we have an arbitrary will and a non-arbitrary will of a person or subgroups of persons. We can begin to understand what coercion is and what moral obligation is. We can make the arbitrary rules of the game given by the extended order of capitalism required to be accountable to moral obligation. No one individual or subset of individuals by their personal desires could decree their arbitrary will onto others. We are commonly obligated to our Creator and creation, which is our physical existence. Paragraph 14. When we measure our connections to physical existence, we have the foundation of Seryla philosophy. Our ideas with attached reality must measure against physical existence. Seryla philosophy stands on this base. Our human physical construction resulted from physical existence. We connect our moral obligations to this physical existence. In understanding this, we discover a tool to social understanding. It not only shows us what coercion is or is not, which in turn releases freedom and liberty to all human beings, it tells us when we are dealing with minority rights and individual rights. It shows us clearly and measurably how, where, and when we are not conducting ourselves morally. It then exposes coercive power to which we can begin to work against. When we work towards moral actions that measure to our physical realities, which includes our government and economic behaviors, this leads us to responsibility at all levels. It takes away evangelical and insect-style capitalism, as well as immoral self-interest actions of government and individuals. It provides us an understanding about our required relationship with our physical existence and the balance that we need to maintain. Paragraph 15. Our simple reality loop of Seryla philosophy has a commonality to all individual human beings. Despite not knowing all individual actions, it can work because it has a common measurement source between every individual. Our needed constant was not the human mind, but our common physical existence. We have a common physical reality without the interference of human beings, except for those that choose to act immorally. The actions of these people become exposed, and their actions would not be defendable. If the majority of people chose to act immorally, they could by choice or by ignorance. Education is critical to any civilization and to its long-term survival. Faith-based educations, be it religious or economic, can only lead to suffering, as they do not connect to our physical realities. Reality-based education is education with accountability. This accountability can lead us to the removal of suffering, to increase harmony, and to the improved condition of humankind. Paragraph 16. We can begin to outline and present Seryla philosophy. In Book 1, we will learn how to move our ideas so they measure against our physical world. We will learn what ideas are, where they reside, and how we can manipulate them. We will learn the difference between our physical existence and our experiential existence. We will discover that our human mental animating abilities have physical characteristics that can bend us away from our truth or bring us directly to truth. When we bring in our physical world realities without the interference from a framed reference, our free will is open to truth. Footnote 3. Framed reference and free will are fully discussed in their specific chapters. When we bring our physical world realities without the interference from a framed reference, our free will is open to truth. We do not alter our understanding by attaching the idea of reality to non-reality ideas. We will discover through an open free will that physical existence determines our code of conduct. We will discover that morality measures against our physical human characteristics. We will discover how we can or cannot move our actions in our physical world relationally to our physical realities. When we understand these measured actions, we know when people attempt to manipulate people by moving ideas between broadband and narrowband ideas. This movement can manipulate and disenfranchise people to their given rights and provide individuals ways to subvert their moral obligations. We could have further disenfranchisement accomplished by manipulating the true physical boundaries of ideas to our actions. This happens when people present ideas as being universally possible in actions when they are limited in possible actions. Paragraph 17. Seryla philosophy can provide physical evidence to distinguish between an arbitrary will and a non-arbitrary will. We need our understanding to fit our physical existence. It is simple. It is also difficult. It is difficult because we must shift our thought in its basic state. Nevertheless, once you have it, you will have a tool to understand the realities around you. You will understand these realities because they are simply there for you to see. You will understand them because you will experience them firsthand. Reality does not come from books or people telling you what the truth is or is not. Therefore, our physical connections with Seryla philosophy are simply a way to measure back to our physical realities. We can stay tuned to our realities and move forward a fulfilling course of action for humankind. With our tool of Seryla philosophy, we can control coercion and release our freedoms and liberties. This ends Episode 2, Define Coercion. If you have subscribed, thank you. If you haven't, please do, and lovingly hit that like.